Hi, my name is Kelly Wilbur, and I am one Catholic counselor. In a 1906 letter to Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud wrote that psychoanalysis is in essence a cure through love. And studies have consistently shown that the benefits of psychotherapy are driven primarily by the relationship between the counselor and the client. Dare I say, a loving relationship. I am never more misunderstood than when I talk about love. The word love can mean very different things. Are we talking about your love for your pet, your friend, your spouse, or your enemy? And how do these loves intersect, overlap, or build on one another? To address these questions, I will use two sources. First, I offer C.S. Lewis's book, The Four Loves, which breaks love down into four categories: affection, friendship, eros, or the love of lovers, and charity. To demonstrate each type of love, I can think of no better vehicle than James Cameron's masterpiece, Aliens, a 1986 science fiction action horror film starring Sigourney Weaver. Like The Empire Strikes Back and Terminator 2, Aliens demonstrates how a sequel can be even better than the original.
That's impossible!
Yes, it is possible. And if you haven't watched Aliens, then stop this video and everything else you're doing today, go watch it, and then come back in 137 minutes. No, I'm not joking. Go on. I'll wait here. Okay, everyone else, let's recap the movie. After escaping one alien encounter in the first movie, Ellen Ripley travels with a group of Marines to fight a full-fledged alien infestation at a space colony. There they find that the only survivor is a young girl whom Ripley vows to protect to the end. The characters are awesome. Of course, Ripley is one of our first female action heroes, and she will not allow the young survivor, Newt, to die. We also have Burke, the two-faced company man.
Don't let that fool you. I'm really an okay guy.
Bishop, the synthetic.
I prefer the term artificial person myself.
And Lieutenant Gorman, the incompetent commander.
Do something!
But it's really the other Marines who make this movie great. For instance, we have Hicks.
Hudson, sir. He's Hicks.
Okay, we'll start with Private Hudson.
Good idea.
Played by the late, great Bill Paxton. He has all the best lines of this film.
Why don't you put her in charge?
But we also have Private Hicks, played by Michael Bain, right off his success with The Terminator.
But stay frosty.
And to round out the cast, we have Private Vasquez and, well, a bunch of other Marines who don't quite make it past the 60-minute mark.
Hey, maybe you haven't been keeping up on current events, but we just got our asses kicked, pal.
So with that background, let's go back to C.S. Lewis's categories of love and see how they play out in the film. We'll start with the first category, affection. Lewis describes affection as a warm comfortableness or a satisfaction in being together when the object of love is familiar. He calls it the least discriminating of loves because affection can love the unattractive, and almost anyone can become an object of affection. Lewis summarizes affection by saying that it is teaching us first to notice, then to endure, then to smile at, then to enjoy, and finally to appreciate the people who happen to be there. Despite the niceties of affection, Lewis warns that by itself, affection will go bad on us. That's because affection doesn't keep us loving people when they inevitably change and become less familiar. Affection fades when people stop generating those feelings of affection in us. To love through change and love through the absence of affectionate feelings, we have to reach a higher form of love than affection. An example of affection in Aliens is Ripley's love of her cat Jonesy. In this scene, Ripley is reunited with Jonesy after a long separation. You can see that warm comfortableness of something familiar. But what would happen if Jonesy lost the characteristics that cultivated these affectionate feelings? What if Jonesy became extremely aloof or even hostile? Lewis would argue that affection without familiarity could not be maintained alone and would go bad without being fed by a higher form of love. Lewis's second category of love is friendship. Lewis describes friendship as when two or more companions discover that they have in common some insight or interest or even taste which the others do not share. He contrasts friends with lovers by saying that lovers are normally face-to-face, absorbed in each other. Friends, side by side, absorbed in some common interest. Lewis paraphrases Emerson by saying that in friendship the question, "Do you love me?" really means, "Do you care about the same truth?" Thus, Lewis claims, friendship must be about something. Consequently, friendship, like affection, can also go bad on us. That's because friendship doesn't keep us loving people when common interests inevitably change. Only a higher form of love can sustain us through those types of transitions. An example of friendship in Aliens is the relationship between the Marines. You can see their bonding through their common interests. They don't stare into each other's eyes, but instead look together towards something they all hold dear. But what would happen if those common interests were lost? Would Vasquez still pal around with Drake if he stopped doing pull-ups and instead decided to write love poetry? Lewis would argue that friendship without common interests could not be maintained alone and would go bad without being fed by a higher form of love. Lewis's third category of love is eros. Lewis describes eros as the state we frequently call being in love. At the same time, Lewis warns that eros is not reducible merely to sexual desire. He maintains that while a man's raw sexual desire wants a pleasure for which a woman happens to be the necessary piece of apparatus, eros, in contrast, wants not a woman but one particular woman, the beloved. Eros sees the beloved most intensely as a thing admirable in herself, important far beyond her relation to the lover's need. Despite all of this, like affection and friendship, eros can also go bad. Lewis observes that eros is notoriously the most mortal of our loves, and that we must do the work of eros when eros is not present. That type of work must be done by a higher form of love. An example of eros in Aliens is the relationship between Ripley and Hicks. Yeah, I know, I'm pushing it. There's not a lot of eros in Aliens. However, there are brief glimpses of sparks flying here. Who knows what would have happened if the writers of Alien 3 hadn't killed Hicks off? Those jerks. However, we all know that the energetic rush of eros in new lovers must always transition to the deeper work of commitment and dedication. Lewis would argue that eros without this work could not be maintained alone and would go bad without being fed once again by a higher form of love. As you can see, affection, friendship, and eros all make demands that must be met. And as Lewis says, they never quite seek simply the good of the loved object for the object's own sake. Eros fades with familiarity, affection fades with disfamiliarity, and friendship fades with dissimilarity. Each type of love demands something from the object. Eros wants something new and excitable. Affection wants something old and recognizable. And friendship wants you to keep liking the movie Aliens no matter how many times you see it. Well, that's if you're going to be my friend. The higher form of love I've been talking about, the one that overcomes the shortcomings of pure affection, friendship, and eros, is charity. Lewis explains that charity in a man enables him to love what is not naturally lovable. Charity exists without any preconditions. If I love you with charity, I don't need you to stimulate affection in me, I don't need you to have similar interests, and I don't need to feel in love with you. All the demands of charity are on me, the giver, not you, the receiver. An example of charity in Aliens is the relationship between Ripley and Newt. Newt is rebellious, dirty, and disrespectful.
They're dead. All right, can I go now?
In other words, she isn't naturally lovable. Ripley just met her, so there isn't any familiarity to inspire affection. Ripley and Newt have no common interests to stimulate a friendship, and eros is clearly off the table. Still, despite Newt lacking any obvious lovable qualities, Ripley is willing to sacrifice her own life to save Newt over and over again. This is the type of completely selfless and self-disinterested love that Lewis calls charity. So far, I've given a somewhat apophatic description of this highest form of love. In other words, I've described it by saying what it is not. But what is it? St. Thomas Aquinas put it best when he said that to love is to will the good of another. Thus, the enduring love of charity is an act of the will. We decide to give this type of love. And we can make this decision in the absence of affections, common interests, attractions, or any other characteristics a person may or may not have. So what is this good that we are willing? Well, simply put, it is the highest good, which is the highest love, charity. In other words, when I participate in charity by loving you, I am willing that you also participate in charity in your own life, that you love others, accept love from others, and love yourself, and that you do this even when the conditions of affections, common interests, and attractions are not met. This is the highest form of love. This is the type of love that completes and fulfills the loves of affection, friendship, and eros. And this is how God loves.